Okay, welcome back. This is kind of the part 2 of a series that I'm doing over used RED cameras. I recently just bought a RED MONSTRO. You can check out the video I made over kind of the initial reasons why I bought that camera in the last video. But in this video, we're going to be comparing it to another RED used camera because there are other RED cameras on the market that are still extremely good cameras and cost a lot less than what I paid for the RED MONSTRO. And really what I want to see is because there's all this hype around RED Dragon. Now I've tested the RED Dragon before on the channel, but that wasn't in comparison with the RED MONSTRO, which the RED MONSTRO is kind of the flagship camera for RED at the time. And before that, there were a lot of iterations of RED cameras. They had a lot of different style of sensors depending on what you needed, but it seems like collectively online, people still believe that the RED Dragon sensor is one of the best sensors that RED ever created. Now I'm saying this all in context without talking about the modern DSMC3 cameras. The reason we're talking about used cameras, obviously, is because they cost way less money. They are older, but they're extremely capable cinema cameras, and they give you so many options with the bodies, and their quality is so good still. So at first I thought about buying a RED Dragon. I thought about buying a RED DSMC2 style body RED Dragon instead of the MONSTRO, given that you can get a RED Dragon kit for south of $5,000 US, whereas my MONSTRO kit was just under $10,000. Kind of wanted to put my money where my mouth was and see if I bought the right camera or not. So it's really, this test is for me. I wanted to see if the RED Dragon could hold up against the RED MONSTRO. A couple differences between the camera is obviously the sensor size. The RED Dragon has a little bit bigger than a super 35mm sensor. A lot of people online say that it has close to a full frame size sensor, a 1.1x crop. That's kind of misinformation. The sensor is pretty big, but if you actually go to RED's website and do the crop calculator on their site, you'll see that the RED Dragon sensor is significantly smaller than the MONSTRO. It is bigger than most super 35mm sensors, but it's not as big as most people kind of say it is. We're gonna be working with a 6K file versus an 8K file, so you're obviously gonna see some sharpness differences between the cameras, but really what I wanna see here is kind of how the dynamic range is handled on both cameras, and how the color compares, and if I made the wrong decision buying the way more expensive camera. But first, I wanna talk about a few things that people commented on the last video over the RED MONSTRO. Yes, I put in the pinned comments. Obviously, the day I released my video over the RED MONSTRO, the same week that I bought my RED MONSTRO, Blackmagic did a price drop on their Blackmagic 12K LF. And a lot of people were like, well, I guess you made the wrong decision then. And I have to say, you know, buying a camera is a personal choice, and you can do with your money what you want, and I don't think like I made the wrong decision. I like the RED workflow, I like the RED raw files, I own a RED Komodo already, and this was obviously an upgrade from the RED Komodo. Really what I was trying to do is create an ecosystem for myself when I shoot. So now I have the RED Komodo as a B camera that can shoot alongside a studio camera is what I'll call it, which is the RED MONSTRO. The MONSTRO is better than the Komodo in basically every way except that it has a rolling shutter and not a global shutter, which is exactly why I thought they would pair really well together. If I need a shot that requires global shutter, now I have the RED Komodo to pull out of the bag if I need to shoot on that. But really what I plan to do, like I'm hopefully shooting another feature film soon here, and my plan is to actually have the RED Komodo always built on a gimbal, ready to go for any movement shots that I need on the gimbal. It's a much smaller camera. It has the global shutter so you can whip the sensor around if you need to. You're not going to get weird rolling artifacts. And then I'll have the MONSTRO as the A camera for pretty much the entire film when I don't need those types of moving shots. So for me, I've already been in the RED ecosystem and I've already spent a lot of money on that. I've worked with those files a lot. So I'm just trying to add to that. I'm trying to make that ecosystem even better for myself. So the RED MONSTRO was a great addition to my package, to the setup that I like to use. If I switch to Ursa, then I would probably sell the Komodo, then I'd have to get another camera, Blackmagic 6K or something to go along with that so I can have two cameras. Because the reality is the Ursa 12K LF is a really heavy, big, large camera with two monitors built into it and XLR ports. Yes, my MONSTRO kit also has a big monitor on it and XLR ports and all that I/O, but I can strip this down to a smaller package if I want to shoot lighter, whereas you're stuck with that with the Ursa. So for me right now, I definitely don't think I made the wrong decision. Also, buying a package used like this, my MONSTRO, is going to be way less than actually kitting out that Ursa 12K, putting a monitor on it, maybe putting the EVF on it, getting those heavy duty batteries for it. I didn't have to do any of that, even got memory with my kit. So honestly, I feel like I made the right decision for what I was trying to do. 12K looks like a really interesting camera and I would like to explore it more. I really want to explore if there is actually noise reduction happening in the shadows on that camera, because that would bum me out. As I do pixel people a lot for YouTube content, I don't really want a camera that shoots raw but has noise reduction applied. It's a little fishy. I think for most people, no one will care there, obviously, but for me, it's just not what I wanted in a camera. So I like having the ecosystem of having basically an A camera, which is my studio camera, and a B camera, which is my Komodo, and I will keep both of them in my kit for the foreseeable future. Which brings us to the Dragon, though. A lot of people called the Komodo the mini red dragon. So I did want to see how the Dragon would hold up against the MONSTRO. So in these initial tests here, really what I'm looking for is where the dynamic range is kind of mapped, where the highlights clipped, what kind of noise is created on both cameras, and generally what the colors look like coming out of both cameras, just straight out of camera. And from what I can tell, it's kind of similar with what happened with the Komodo. The Dragon leans a little bit green, but really if you just push it to like +5 or +10 magenta, it almost matches the MONSTRO exactly. I do feel that straight out of camera with the built-in red Rec. 709, the MONSTRO does look a little bit cleaner as far as color latitude goes. It just looks more natural right out of camera. It just looks a little bit more pleasant, but the Dragon looks really nice as well. Now, a little disclaimer here. I was using the DZO Arl lenses for this test. I had the 50 on the MONSTRO and I had the 35 on the Dragon. Both PL mount, different PL mounts, probably shimmed a little differently. The sensor might be in a different spot because on a red camera, you can actually move the sensor back and forth to change your back focus. I'm not sure, but for me, even though one was 8K and one was 6K, kind of putting that aside, it just always felt like the Dragon was much softer, even in a 4K timeline, but I'm thinking that's because of the 35mm DZO lens, not because of the camera or sensor itself. I think that the 35mm lens just isn't quite as poppy and sharp as the 50 in the Arl kit. I could be wrong, this is some more testing I want to do, but it was much harder for me to get like a really nice crisp focus, even at a similar T-stop when shooting with the 35mm. So just kind of keep that in mind through these tests, that the Dragon overall just might look a hair softer, and I think it's just because of that lens. We're cropping deeper into that lens, where it's supposed to resolve out to, you know, VistaVision full frame, whatever you want to call it. But I think cropping into that is going to lose some of the resolving power, or maybe that 50 is just really that much nicer. I really like the combo of the 50mm on the MONSTRO. It just looks very nice. So I shot all these at 800. What you'll notice about the Dragon usually is that the ISO is mapped kind of weird. You're kind of always a stop off. If you're shooting at 800 ISO, it's kind of gonna look like 400 or 500 ISO on all the other cameras you'd be shooting on if you were comparing it to that. No difference here. They are both using the same OLPF. They're both using the standard OLPF. Turns out, I guess, that it's kind of rare to get a standard OLPF for the red DSMC-1 Dragon, which I was testing a DSMC-1 body here. It's the same one I used with my Dragon video, but it's the same sensor. It should still show off what we're trying to see here. It's just see the image quality between the two cameras. But beyond the ISO issues, the MONSTRO was much more sensitive again. What was the most interesting about this when I did these tests was that once again, the MONSTRO had much more sensitivity in the shadows, but actually the Dragon seemed to hold anywhere, depending on how I was kind of testing it, because it wasn't super scientific, somewhere between a half a stop and even over a full stop of more highlight latitude in most scenarios. Now this is very interesting. Traffic lights go away here on the Dragon at a just past a 5.6, shooting into the light. And then we've got closer to an 11, an 8-11 split on the MONSTRO shooting towards the light. So I'm actually going to show some tests later in the video that were from this kind of TV setup, this wall behind me that I'm shooting in front of. And a lot of the times the MONSTRO would clip on the TVs way before the Dragon would clip, maybe close to a full stop, maybe even a little more. So I'd actually have to stop down the lens on the MONSTRO to get these TVs to not clip. But that being said, once again, the shadow latitude on the MONSTRO is so much greater. There's nothing coming up on the noise meters, even when I stop down and get the highlights exposed right. And the dynamic range is still very full, but the Dragon was showing a noise meter pretty much the entire time I was shooting into this background, even after a nice black shade. So it's pretty clear just looking at these quick tests here that the MONSTRO is a better sensor. The 8K is going to give you a sharper image. It's going to give you a cleaner image. The color is going to look very nice. But the Dragon is an extremely capable camera. And I just really want to emphasize that right now, that if you're in the market for a used cinema camera, and I know I did a whole video over this already, I don't want to be redundant here, but the Dragon holds up very well. And if I didn't need the full frame, if I didn't test modern full frame lenses on YouTube and want to maximize my lenses using the full circle of my lenses, I probably just would have gone with a super super 35mm sensor anyways. It just makes things a lot easier. But for what I do, the full frame was really handy. I also like the full frame because you can crop for different ratios depending on what your commercial clients need, if they need 9:16 and etc. It's nice to have that extra space on the sensor and of course resolution to give them as many deliverables as they need. Like I said in the last video, I wanted a no compromise camera, and that's what the MONSTRO is giving me. But I think for most people, if you don't have the cash to spend on something like a MONSTRO and you want to get into these old red cameras, I would just go right for the Red Dragon. And actually, speaking of used gears, let's take a moment to talk about this video's sponsor, which is MPB. Listen, when I went to go buy the red MONSTRO, I needed to get a little bit of money to put towards that camera. So I looked around my office and I was like, what other gear am I not using anymore and I can sell? So if you're like me, you probably have some of that stuff laying around yourself, and if you're wanting to get into a new camera, you might want to sell that to put towards some new gear that you're looking to purchase. I'm always telling myself that I will sell it online and put the money towards some equipment that I will actually use, but then I think about the hassle of using online marketplaces and I end up talking myself out of it. But that's where a place like MPB can be extremely convenient. MPB is the largest global platform to buy, sell, and trade used photo and video gear. They have served more than 625,000 visual storytellers, and every year they recirculate more than 500,000 cameras, lenses, and accessories. The best part is that MPB isn't a marketplace. It's a platform where you can sell or trade up your gear. Simply type in the items you want to sell and you will receive a quote extremely fast. And once you've accepted your quote, the process is extremely seamless after that. You'll get doorstep pickup for your items, super fast payment turnaround, and insured shipping, all for free. You can pocket that money or put it towards upgrading to something like a used Red Dragon, or maybe something else from MPB's large inventory of used equipment. So if you're in the market to sell, trade, or buy new equipment, save your time and money with MPB. You can check out MPB at the link in the description below. After doing just some quick side-by-sides, I thought, let me take the camera and put it in a kind of more useful shooting environment. So I came over here, I actually threw up a light, a nice big soft light, and I put the RLs back on the camera, and I thought I would test it in a more creative way. So the only thing to keep in mind is that I had the shutter at a 144-degree shutter angle, just to kind of match the TV flicker back here. But outside of that, the cameras were basically in the same settings. I was shooting red raw, of course, at a 5:1 compression, which is basically the best compression ratio you can get out of both cameras. Some shots have an ND filter on it and some don't, but I was using the same ND filter for both cameras. And this is where I really started to notice the highlight latitude of the Dragon. Now some say if you rate the Red Dragon at around 1600 ISO, you get Alexa level dynamic range. I haven't been able to test that out myself, but it does seem to hold highlights very well. Way more than I ever thought it would, to be honest. And then like with both cameras, if you do swap out the OLPF and you put in a low light OLPF, you're going to also change the sensitivity of the camera. So if you put in a low light OLPF for the Red Dragon, you're gonna get a lot more out of those shadows, and it doesn't seem like you'll actually clip the highlights too much. Although they do make an OLPF that's designed for skin tones and to save highlights that you could also use if you wanted to swap that out for that scenario. I haven't tested all the OLPFs. I just assume use the standard or a low light one. Given the information for the people that I know have been longtime Red users and what they say online, I feel like that's just the way to go. With the MONSTRO, I haven't at all felt like I needed the low light. Comparing it to the Red Dragon and the Komodo, it's just very clear that the Red MONSTRO does extremely well in low light. I hate talking about low light though. The fact that I get comments all the time about is the camera good in low light or not. I mean, I had my lighting in this room at like 10%. I don't know why people are so obsessed with low light. Cameras are very sensitive and work well, and I'm going to throw up a light to make a shot look better, and I'm not worried about running around in the dark. What are you even doing that for? I still to this day do not understand the sentiment at all. So be the judge for yourself what you think about this footage, but I can honestly say that both of these cameras are very good and very capable. And I would say if you're in the market and you do not want to spend that much money, you can get a Red Dragon, and I would say get a DSMC2 Red Dragon just for the reliability factors. That body style is going to be newer. It's going to give you more accessory options. It's going to be able to have the monitors, the little pogo monitors that can mount right on top. It's just a better overall design, the DSMC2 body. Cleaner, nicer, newer. You can basically kit it out exactly how I have this MONSTRO kitted out because it's a modular system. They all operate using the same gear and body. They just have different sensors in them. I mean, you can get a Red Dragon and a DSMC2 package definitely south of 5,000, maybe even south of 4,000. I mean, around the same price that something like an FX3 package would cost. And you'll pretty much get everything you need in a kit like that if you buy it used. So like a Red Mini Mag, the memory that the Red takes, if you try to buy one online, like that Turbo Red Mag, like a 480 gigabyte, they're like $1,000. But normally they just come with the kit if you're trying to buy a kit. Like mine came with 3 mags, and I didn't have to worry about getting those separate. And you get a lot more value if you buy these cameras as a kit. So for around the price of a new FX3, you're going to get a lot of camera. You get a full-blown cinema camera, can shoot proxies alongside your Red RAW files. It has a touch screen on it. You can swap out all of the mounts on it, PL mount, EF mount. I'm looking to get a Leica mount for mine, which is a whole other topic that we'll talk about in a later video, hopefully. You can get all the I/O that you need for these cameras. I mean, you're getting full-blown cinema camera packages. Yes, the Red Dragon is a 13-year-old sensor, but if you get the DSMC2 line, they have updated a lot of that. You get better cooling on it. It's just gonna be a much better version of the camera, and it'll be a few years newer than 13 years old. And that just gets you into the Red RAW workflow and really operating a camera that's built for cinema. These cameras do get a little bit heavy, just a little bit of a disclaimer. This old DSMC1 that I was using actually weighs close to 17 pounds with the DZO RL lens on it, which those lenses are quite heavy. You could always put much smaller lenses on these cameras. But my MONSTRO package is about 18 pounds, but I have got a really big, heavy metal handle on top of it and the much bigger, nicer screen. And you can slim these way down if you take off all the I/O stuff off the back. You can make them much lighter if you need to, which is what's so nice about the modular system. And there's a lot of argument for a heavy camera. Your shots are going to be smoother if you're doing handheld shots. You just might get tired a little bit more quickly. Now, I don't want to get into the whole thing about like client perspective, but the optics of it are a little bit better as well. Having a big camera like this on set does kind of legitimize you and make the client feel a little bit more comfortable about what they're paying for, and you're able to upcharge a little bit for a Red camera. I've always been able to charge for my Komodo, and now I will charge more for the MONSTRO and always get a little bit more out of my day rate, you know, when shooting professionally with these cameras. So I highly recommend the Red Dragon. It has a little bit bigger than the Super 35mm sensor, which is really obviously not a big deal. I like me some deep focus. I like me some solid depth of field. It just depends what you're trying to do. I mean, Arri's best camera right now is a 35mm sensor, so I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this over a full frame sensor like the MONSTRO. I just wanted that no compromise system, and so that's why I went with the full frame. And obviously shooting these side by side, the MONSTRO sensor is just better. But that doesn't mean that the Red Dragon isn't good. It's actually an extremely good sensor. So a lot of people in the last video also talked about the Komodo X and thought that maybe I made a bad decision going with the MONSTRO over the Komodo X. But like I said in the last video, I shot pretty much all year on the Komodo X, and I really liked that camera. But there was a lot of things that the MONSTRO offered that the X doesn't offer, and that's why I went with it. But that being said, I would be curious to see what the sensors look like next to each other. I clearly like to compare sensors, but let me know down in the comments if you want to see a comparison between the Komodo X and the MONSTRO sensor. And if enough people say yes to that, I will make that video here shortly. I have access to both cameras, so I might as well just test them out and see how the new modern DSMC3 holds up against the older MONSTRO system. If you have any questions about the Red system, I will try to answer them down in the comments below. But as always, guys, until next time, I'm Sakurai. See ya.